Hello, my name is Jim Daniel. This is a short session to review what happened in the last half-day session at the Nonprofit Alliance in October, at the Leadership Summit in October 2019 in Tucson. I had the privilege of speaking to many of you, but alas, many of you also had to depart for flights. So this is a way to get caught up on what we covered in a quick form. Now, recall that day one, we talked about sector transformation in the beginning, first half of the day, all the things that are changing in the world around us. And then we talked about organizational change and transformation, how we're responding to that. And this third and final session was to talk about digital transformation and how that applies to helping all of these organizations, all of you, make a sea change in how you work. Now, before we cover digital transformation, let's just step back for a moment and say, why is this happening? This movement is happening because the world is speeding up. It's never going to be this slow again. I mean, it's going faster and faster, but think about that. It will never be this slow again. And it's not just sped up, it's more interconnected, which makes it much harder to work. So we're more connected to everything that's all going faster and faster. So the combination can be amazingly overwhelming. Now, this is across all sectors. This is across banking and entertainment and healthcare and retail and you name it. It's all going faster and faster. And net result is many of the ways we've learned to work and we've been taught to excel no longer apply. Many of the things that got us here and made us successful don't work well in this sped up world. In fact, it's causing a lot of stress on us. Now, this sped up world is occurring all around us, and I would argue it's even harder for nonprofits because we come into this sped up world already under-resourced, already working hard. I mean, we have these incredible people working on passionately for the most amazing missions in the world, yet we all know we never have the resources to align with our ambition. We want to solve the problems of the world, and we're willing to work long hours. The reality is every year we feel like we're stretching it thinner and thinner and thinner. Revenue goes up 4%, expenses go up 4.5%. So our most precious resource, we think of it in terms of like money, but it's really time. The people who are doing this work are so time impoverished they cannot think, let alone be creative. And so if these new old ways of working aren't applying anymore, what it results in is an enormous amount of stress. I would say literally it's killing us. Stressor hormones like cortisol are flooding our bloodstream, and it causes all sorts of bad health side effects. So it's a sped up, crazy world. We're already maxed out. There is hope. Now, the term is digital transformation, or DX for short. It's a terrible name because it evokes images of technology and social media and mobile phones and an always-on world, but in reality, it's about a mindset and culture shift. And so what we unpacked in the session is how that might look. Now, we're taking some of the tools and we'll be presenting them throughout this session that come from some of the world's best digital transformation organizations who teach others. And I've had the privilege of working with many of them on helping them understand and learn to speak nonprofit and beginning that work with nonprofits. Now, I myself come from the tech sector. So the first 20 years of my life were in strategy, business development. The last 12 of that was CEO of technology companies. But a decade ago, I was privileged to become the chief operating officer of Oxfam America. And in that role, I oversaw programs, policy advocacy, fundraising, and operations. And I tried to figure out how we all worked. And what I found was, as I said, great people and great mission, but our ways of working just seemed so hard and not appropriate. And not only were they not digitally transformed, we were using a lot of tools that made it harder to do it than we really needed to. So digital transformation, this tool set and this view comes from Revol Consulting, organization based in Seattle. Has done awesome work with organizations like Microsoft and T-Mobile and on and on. So at its heart, it's a culture change. And it's a culture that, embraces, that we're going to go into a learning environment that's got empathy and trust and respect for each other, will be flexible. So think of this green hexagon as its body of digital transformation, and think of the two bottom blue hexagon as the legs we stand on, and the two on the top as the arms. And the two things we have to stand on is, Becoming a data-driven culture is all about seriously gathering data, knowing how to use it statistically, knowing how to draw inferences, knowing how to apply it to decisions very, very quickly. And to the right, the lean and agile work, we're talking a lot faster. When I began in the computer industry, when we would launch a new software product, we would spend probably a year, sometimes 2 years, getting version 1.0 to market with multiple new alpha and beta versions along the way. We might invest millions. Today, the world's unrecognizable. From the time it takes to come up with an idea, write the spec, build it, test it, and deploy it, the cycle is now down to 5 business days, sometimes 10, but preference 5. And in this sped up world, you've got a lot of information about where you're going. So the idea here is the end result's not knowable, it's not hierarchical. Small teams are constantly being creative. They have this creative confidence, like you see on the upper right, to go off and try and explore new ideas. And everything they do is radically shared. It's not just sharing within your own team or across the organization. It would imply things like we would share all our data with our donors, we'd share it with our beneficiaries, we'd share it with other nonprofits. So digital transformation is a set of tools really for business transformation. And within that, I just want to focus on one of them called design thinking. So just one. And this is one of the ones we're going to use throughout the session today. So let's just watch this little video, shall we?
Hi there. Have you noticed that the world is full of problems? There are big, hairy problems, like poverty and disease, and small annoyances like misplacing your keys. However, the geniuses at Stanford have come up with a process that will broaden your perspective and help you create better solutions no matter the type of problem. This process is called design thinking, and it's here to change the way you tackle problems. Design thinking encourages people to explore new alternatives, creating options that had not existed before. Design thinking is successful because it focuses on the needs of the user. It's more than just good ergonomics, it's about understanding the context and culture of the stakeholders involved. This understanding is found using direct observation and qualitative data, which produces stories that people can really empathize with. Once the research is conducted, the problem solver is more apt to define what the real problem is. After diagnosing the true problem, it's time to ideate or brainstorm new ideas without the constraints of existing solutions. Because design thinkers learn by doing, these radical ideas are then made into simple prototypes that test possible outcomes. Rapid prototyping speeds up the innovation process because we only learn about the quality of our ideas when we test them in the real world. The process of ideating, prototyping, and testing is repeated early on so that mistakes are quick, cheap, and ultimately lead to success. So, why design thinking? The process provides a method and a unifying language for multidisciplinary collaboration, leading to greater creativity and better solutions faster. Suddenly, the world's problems are simple and manageable with design thinking.
So that nice little video is just a dive on one of the tools, design thinking, that helps us do things differently. There's many, many, many more tools, but it's one of these tools that lets you get bite-sized pieces and move quickly through this world. When you actually use these sped up DX tools, you can start to imagine taking on much bigger challenges with tools like platform thinking and as well as rapid innovation and new ways of donor relationships. So how would we reach 10 times more? You know, many organizations have big, bold ambitions, but their activities are a pittance compared to the vision. We want to end poverty. We want to address climate change. You know, the reality is we're making a very de minimis change. But if we can take on much bigger goals and we can redefine our relationships then with our donors, I would argue that's how we become happy fruit dancing. We also, an interesting thing occurs when you come up with these approaches, you come up with new business models. Things that I never really thought of before, like earned income models and so forth. Digitally transformed organizations, done properly, there's a caveat here, and I'm going to talk about it later. It's not as straightforward as it may seem, but they do change how they work internally, and one of the best things that happens is every single day of every single week, something good happens and something gets done. in a sped up world where you can get something crossed off your list every day and feel like I've made an accomplishment, it feels really good. You get dopamine. It's the opposite of cortisol. It's in stark contrast to if you use traditional tools, the to-do list just gets longer and longer and longer. And in fact, many of the folks we surveyed when we were there said, yeah, how many of you take some time at the beginning of every week just to redo your to-do list because it's gotten so big you have to organize it? So we talked about tools like Kanban and other things that can help you reimagine even seeing your workload and knowing how to manage it in a much better way. All right, enough talking about it at the high level. Let's go into a case study because as nonprofits, we prefer to learn from each other about other nonprofits. So we welcome Janet Hall to our session. Janet's a very impressive individual, a decade with the CIA as an analyst, about 20 years working with tech companies on the gnarliest, biggest transformational projects out there, helping way back in the day, AOL completely put together a whole new platform. So Janet was part of a team that was brought into American Heart several years ago as they built a new digitally transformed team called the Institute of Precision Cardiovascular Medicine. So what Janet talked about was the fact that they needed to create a new culture within the American Heart Association culture because they were going to think way outside the box. Like, hey, what happens if we could somehow get all these organizations with their precious clinical data to pool it and share it in ways that would allow them to get better outcomes dramatically faster? The idea that a researcher might be able to subscribe to a data set and run a bench trial that might take them weeks, months, or years and get results in hours. And if they could do this, it would radically change the underlying business model. I mean, today, American Heart Association, like many organizations on the forefront of tackling diseases, raises money from donors on one hand and, gives it out in grants to needing research teams on the other. This is a totally different business. This is actually pooling and aggregating data and serving it up and doing it in ways that would require skills and operational mindset that wasn't used before. And so Janet spent some time taking us through that multi-year journey and did a great job of describing how there's a way to do this that can work and there's ways that maybe wouldn't work. So as an example, American Heart chose to create a new unit within, but they were very thoughtful about bringing in outsiders who could help accelerate the work, whether it's Janet as an employee or Amazon Web Services as a provider, and then bringing in and rotating through the best of the best across American Heart so they could get used to this sped up and different way of working world that's part of digital transformation. So as an example, money could be raised for this work, not by getting donors to give you money, but rather to charge for it. And so they've begun, and Janet was sharing with us at a very high level, the first contracts are being signed with for-profit organizations to subscribe to the data. And creating an environment that's very entrepreneurial is exciting, but not always easy. Internal business processes, whether it's legal, finance, HR, aren't set up for these things. And having to do that requires a lot of transformation both ways. And so what she shared with us was a really interesting set of insights into the journey. It's possible, it's thoughtful, you'll hit dead ends. You probably want to learn from others who are similar to you who might be further along. Because at the end of the day, digital transformation is not as simple as it may seem. And in fact, last year, about 1.3 trillion was spent on digital transformation across the world, across all sectors. And the majority of them reported less than far less results achieved in year one than they had hoped. And when they looked at the organizations that were far more successful versus those that weren't, the big difference was it was a mindset shift, a lot of communication, a lot of talking about changing the way you work in your culture to be networked and flat and speedy, which is very different than maybe how the rest of the organization operates. So we broke, and as we started to move, now we wanted to talk about this. We're going to go and look at some more tools, and we're going to get some feedback as to where we stand. So for those that were still in the room, and we used a polling tool. We were starting to ask questions about where are we on this journey. So everybody got out their phones and their tablets or laptops. They could either text or use Wi-Fi. And we're going to ask ourselves some questions around these key areas. Before we begin, who's left in the room? Okay, so of the folks in the room, there's a little over 40 got online and were able to use the tool. There was more people in the room. Some folks were struggling, but it was about 40-60. 40% were part of the nonprofit organizations, and 60% were coming from service providers and technical partners and agencies. Now, later on, as we talk out through the questions and I share the data, keep in mind that when I spoke to somebody, say from an agency, I said, put on your largest customer hat. Imagine that you are your largest customer as defined by the organization that paid you the most money last year, and answer the question for your client, so that the answers were for, if you will, all nonprofits, whether the ones that were in the room or the customers of the vendors and agencies in the room. Okay? So let's take a double click and go a little bit deeper into design thinking and look at how Fjord, which is the digital transformation and design thinking arm of Accenture. Now, granted, this is huge. Accenture's got about over 400,000 employees. There's about 80,000 just in the digital transformation team. So it gives you a sense of the scope of this. And they're the premier organization. This is one of their ways they describe in more detail what's inside of a specific type of design thinking called service design.
What is service design? I've been thinking about this for a while, and I recently discovered a brilliant quote by Mark Futine that I think sums it up perfectly. When you have two coffee shops right next to each other, each selling the exact same coffee for the exact same price, service design is the reason you go into one coffee shop and not the other. So let's play that out in a little scenario. Coffee shop A decide they want a mobile app, so they put a team full of people together to work on it for a couple of months before delivering it to their customers. The customers download the app only to find it's got nothing that they need. Now let's look at Coffee Shop B. Coffee Shop B put the customer at the heart of the experience. They talk to them. They do some immersive research and really get to know what the customer's doing before, during, and after their coffee. They can map this out on a customer journey where they identify the highs and lows of the experience and uncover some service opportunities and can start to explore solutions. The team then start to speak to other people from around the business. They speak to the colleagues in store and understand what their day looks like. They speak to the founder to look back at the original vision for the coffee shop, as well as the marketing team and the suppliers too. Once they have all of these people together, they can run a workshop or a series of workshops where they can identify the real business objective and exactly what they want to achieve. They can start to design some concepts and test them with the customers they now have a relationship with. They can do a tech analysis and plot everything on a blueprint that documents all of the support systems necessary to bring these concepts to life. With all this, they can create their North Star vision, all resulting in a mobile app full of features that customers love. But it doesn't stop there. They've also identified that colleagues need a tablet application to help them deal with the extra flow of traffic in store, and the payment system needs updating so all three can work in harmony. They might design a colleague training and engagement program and redesign their store to optimize the physical experience too, whilst also looking at how they talk about themselves socially, possibly even introducing some new product lines. These are what we call the front stage experiences. But in order for it to all come together, we must look at the backstage too. Here you will find the back-end systems that drive all the digital propositions, key metrics that we measure ourselves by, learn from, and iterate upon the services, as well as a CRM system and some delivery partners. So, service design is about three things. 1, customer-centric. It's about putting the customer at the heart of everything you do, and only then will you create services people love. 2, co-creation. It's about exploring and designing these concepts together, and as a result, you will ensure services are both technically feasible and business viable. 3, holistic. It's about building interdependent, interrelated experiences that all connect with people on an emotional level. That way, you'll create services that scale beyond the original idea. To round it all off, let's revisit Mark's quote. Service design is not just what makes you walk into one coffee shop and not the other. It's the reason you keep coming back and tell all your friends about it.
I love these videos. I mean, they make it all sound so neat and wrapped up. But what's good about that video is it introduces these concepts of, beginning with the customer in the middle. And of course, as a nonprofit, our customer is actually often twofold. We have to often think about both our beneficiary and our donor. And then figuring out the teams around them, how they work and how they touch each other. That's something we're not always that very good at. And then putting the whole plan together and all the systems is, again, an area where we can greatly improve. So we wanted to ask ourselves some questions. While we have the audience here, I made an important plea to the group. I said, from where I sit, the Nonprofit Alliance aggregates the parts of the organization that are perhaps the most advanced in using data, personas, journey maps. For the sub-tool of design thinking, they should already be pretty darn close to this. Many of the things in the digital DX toolbox should be familiar, maybe somewhat new, or for many of us, it's old hat. So let's ask some questions around, in this audience, where are we on this? Where are we on the agile and lean processes, and where are we on using things like design thinking? So beginning with the audience, and recall that we're acting either as a nonprofit or as the largest client of the folks in the room who provide services to them. Who's using lean processes, and how many are in this sped up world already? Now, here's the good news, about 2/3 are kind of there, and about 1/3 are not. So we're already in this sort of mostly sped up world. Only 1 in 11 are actually doing it all the time, but over half are in this sped up world. Now, again, I would argue it's not uniformly spread. Many of the organizations that are sped up are often sped up around things like, digital donor, digital marketing issues and so forth, as opposed to, let's say, the slower, direct marketing pieces. But mostly I would say this whole group gets it. And maybe other parts of the organization are much further behind in that thinking. So we then wanted to ask, okay, let's take a look inside of using personas and journey maps. Now, I don't want to I think you all know what personas and journey maps are, and you heard a little bit in the video. But do you have donor personas and do you have that journey map? Now, this chart was only slightly surprising in that about a quarter, it was like 22% no, or just 2%. Thinking about a quarter no. Like, I would have assumed that it was going to be like 5%, 95%. But it was 25% on the negative side and 75% on the positive side. So all in all, not too bad. So we're doing a better job with donors. Interestingly enough, we asked the same question about the other persona and journey map, which is for those people we're trying to help, assuming we're helping people, or for the impact we seek. Are we doing that? And it was inverted, right? So here you have more than 2/3 are strongly in the know or just thinking about it, and only 1/3 or a little less than 1/3 have begun doing this. This indicates there's a really interesting opportunity if we collectively, as part of the Nonprofit Alliance, are going to try to move things forward. Might we be able to bring some of our skills forward into this beneficiary-centric thinking? That's just a question. We then took a deeper dive into this, so let's use another video of another pretty quaint tool here. Here we go. Oops. Sorry about that. Let's get this right. There we go.
In our previous video, we explained how service design can help a coffee shop create unique customer experiences full of surprise and delight. But this is not where the story ends. To help our coffee shop continue to grow, we need to introduce two key players, data and design. Meet Data. She's a curious investigator. She has an analytical mind which can translate the seemingly incomprehensible into something insightful, logical, and useful. Data loves to collect information and examine it. She classifies that information using various characteristics and can spot interesting patterns. She then builds the tools needed to store and group her collections, making them easier to find and call upon when she needs them. Meet Design. He's an empathetic observer. He enjoys getting to know people and developing an understanding of what makes them tick. He explores how they spend their time, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what delights them, and what frustrates them. And he examines how they make decisions. This allows design to imagine how everyday lives could be made easier, more rewarding, and overall better for everyone. For many years, data and design have been fiercely independent. They may be friends, but they've always chosen to solve problems on their own. When working this way, data would come up with fascinating facts and patterns, while design would build future visions for a better world. Let's return to our coffee shop and see how design handles problems. While helping to create new moments of delight, design makes personas based on conversations with existing customers. He invents a varied selection of fictional characters to represent their lifestyle and decision-making influences. He matches potential experiences and products with certain personas. Design will think about what makes a customer choose the coffee or product they buy. Say, for example, a black coffee to wake them up, or a frappuccino to treat themselves. He will understand how the customer feels in each scenario and what they need the most. Now, let's see how data would look at this differently. Data can match behaviors and needs with the right products and services. She knows when the customer is at work and when they're traveling, and she'll learn the difference in their coffee buying habits. She knows when a customer steps out of their home at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, they're going to work, and can forward their regular black coffee order to the coffee shop for a quicker service. She also knows they only order a frappuccino on Sundays, so it'll provide relevant deals for that day only. But what happens if we give these two problem solvers the opportunity to work together? When data and design collaborate on a shared goal, they interweave their unique skills and instincts. They bounce ideas off each other and solve problems using a holistic collection of insights and information. The services they build together have the intelligence and understanding to morph into whatever each customer wants or needs. Together, they can use different information to provide impactful recommendations to improve the customer's day. For example, Data has access to the customer's calendar through the loyalty app, and she can see a 7 a.m. business meeting. She can also see the emails of people in the meeting who have signed up to the app too. This allows design to recommend everyone's favorite coffees to be delivered for the meeting to combat 7 a.m. tiredness. This provides an extremely personalized moment of delight for all the customers and builds the relationship between those customers and the coffee shop. Bringing together data and design results in services that surprise and delight customers. At Fjord, we describe these services as living services. And this is the next generation of service design.
So this gives you a sense of organizations are moving faster and faster to come up with radically new ways of delighting you. You can't even pump gas anymore without the gas pump asking you how your experience was. So what we're seeing is this explosion of data in design. And the question is, can we lean into this as a sector? So, are we using data to inform decisions? And are we on this digital path? And can we do this? These were broken out into sessions where we talked about it as a group. When we asked about the data, it was interesting. Are we using data to drive decision making? Now, not just gathering it and holding it in small teams, but using it across the agency. So the good news is nobody said, nah, we're not into that data stuff. I'm the boss, I'll tell you what to do. But a quarter said, we're only using it sometimes. Usually we're deferring to authority. Nicely 60%, and when you add the rest in, it's almost 80% are using data to drive decision making. So that's good. Now, this slide doesn't quite capture the conversation in the room because there was a very interesting sidebar set of conversations around, yeah, but which data sets which decisions are we talking about? Clearly, decisions around outreach to donors, people understood that. When we got into other areas in the business, it was very clear that this was not the case. So we didn't survey it, but just to let you know that there's this, again, this recurring theme of the TNPA could be interestingly positioned to take its members who have these skills and try to use them elsewhere in the business. And then we asked about overall digital transformation readiness. And what we saw here is, again, nobody said no. About a third said, yeah, we're interested in this. And actually 2/3 said, hey, we're going at it. We're actually pursuing it today. And 1 out of 11 are actually, moving forward, and it's at the heart. So good signs that we're moving forward. We're going in the right direction. But again, I want to reiterate, my experience in working with digital transformation and nonprofits is that many of the vendors that are out there who do primarily for-profit work, their tool sets don't necessarily easily map or are understandable even in the nonprofit space. So choose carefully. And if I can help you in understanding ways to move forward, happy to do so. I see my role as a change agent for the sector and a Sherpa. A lot of people ask me in the meeting and after, how do we get started? And I just said, look, there's many different ways to get started. There's no right answer or wrong answer. There's digital transformation that can transform the inner workings of your own organization. There's digital transformation that can be used to change how you reach out into the outside world. And there's digital transformation workshops that you can sort of get exposed to the concepts to get comfortable with. My experience is that those workshops are great starting points to get a large intact group excited about that and understanding what's possible. But then to follow up, there's a variety of organizations that I can point you to who can guide you along the way. I see myself as a Sherpa to make sure that all of you don't fall into a deep hole on the ice. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found this useful. Take care. Jim Daniell, signing off.